And this is, we're basically using pattern matching to ensure that it adheres to a certain standard. So we can use preg match for this. It's a very powerful function. And like I said, I'm not going to go through how we're going to check for patterns. If you go over to the PHP.net manual, you'll find plenty of information on how to match specific things, whether it be URLs, so we could take out a host name from a URL. We're basically looking for patterns within strings and doing things with that. And there's a variety of ways you can do this, returned as an array, etc., etc. So just for now, that's basically the preg match function. Let's go ahead and make this a bit more interesting. We're going to feed in a string to a function and check if it's got spaces. So let's go ahead and create our function. And if you haven't already looked at functions, don't worry, follow along the example anyway, and if you want to go back and look at functions and how they work, feel free to do so and come back to the tutorial if you don't understand what's going on. So we're going to create a function called has space. And what we're going to do is we're going to return true if the specific string has a space, and we're going to return false if it doesn't. So we're going to feed in the string as an argument up here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say if, and we're going to use the preg match function again to see if we have, like we defined before, a space inside a specific string. Now the string comes from the argument that we've just fed in. So if this does match, then we can return a value of true. So we can return true here. Otherwise, we can return false. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to call this function down here, but we want to call it inside an if statement, because we've got our function, but as far as it goes at the moment, when we refresh, we don't have anything because we haven't called it. So let's create an if statement and say if has space, and let's feed in some text. So this doesn't have a space. If this has space, echo has a space. Else has no spaces. Okay, so, or has at least one space. Now let's take this string out, because I've just thought it would be better defined inside a variable here, and then we can just feed this variable in through there. So let's recap of what we've done. We've created a string here called this doesn't have a space, or with a value this doesn't have a space, with absolutely no spaces in it. And then we're calling our function here and feeding in this argument, which is essentially equal to this string here. And now it's been processed here. We're checking on the preg match, which we've already looked at in the last part, in the first part of the tutorial. And then if this function returns true, which it will if it does have a space, then we're going to say have at least one space, or has at least one space. Otherwise we're going to return false, and we're going to say has no spaces. So let's double check and see if this works. Okay, so it says now has no spaces because this string doesn't in fact have any spaces. Let's just create one space in it and see what happens. Okay, so it now says has at least one space. Now if we just create all the spaces in it we need, let's just put a single quotation mark there, and remember to escape single quotation marks when you're using single quotation marks outside of your string data. Let's refresh, and it still says has at least one space. So that's a brief overview, if you like, of the preg match function, and we've created our own little application here to check if a string data has a space or not. But do feel free to go and look up the preg match pattern checking, and it's very in depth, but once you do get your head around it, you'll be able to look at it and realize actually how useful it is for checking patterns within strings.